Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Be Well, Be Keto. Today's guest is Dr. Bret Scher, who is also known as a low-carb cardiologist. Dr. Scher graduated from Stanford University, and then he went to the Ohio State University Medical School. He is certified, board certified in adult cardiovascular diseases, adult echocardiography, nuclear cardiography. He also has certifications in functional medicine, personal trainer, fitness nutrition, and behavior modification. So Dr. Scher is like amazing. I cannot believe I was so excited to find him because heart disease is the number one killer of both men and women, and Dr. Scher thinks outside the box. So I'm super excited. So let's go say hi to Dr. Scher.
Welcome to the Be Well, Be Keto podcast, where we showcase ordinary people who have achieved extraordinary results. Your host is the high energy girl, health coach, and personal trainer, Tracy Gluhite.
Hey beautiful, my name is Tracy and I'm a health coach and personal trainer and founder of highenergygirl.com. My passion is to help women become high energy, fat burning phenoms without starving to death and spending hours in the gym. So are you like exhausted from the crazy holidays and maybe feeling a little bit of fluffy? Well, guess what? You are in luck because I put together a high energy transformation guide and it is completely free. And it's going to help you boost your energy, banish brain fog, build a little muscle, and burn off that belly fat. Okay, so here's what is in the guide. First off, it starts with mindset, because let's face it, your body can do it. It's your mind you have to convince. Next, we have food. There are 3 phases of the food plan to help you heal your body and create a fat-burning machine. It is awesome, trust me. Also, fitness. We have components for both the home and the gym, beginning, intermediate, and advanced, because if you want to age stronger, then you need to move. And lastly, and most important, is self-care, because let's face it, we women are so crazy busy taking care of everybody else, our homes, our jobs, our families, that we don't take time for ourselves. And even on the airplane, the flight attendant says to put your oxygen mask on first. So grab this free guide, 21 days, high energy transformation. Just click on the link below and that will show up in your inbox right away. Hey, Dr. Scher, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Tracy. Thanks for having me.
I was so excited to see a low-carb cardiologist because I don't think that's a very popular term these days. What do you think about that?
Definitely not a popular term. In fact, it's probably more of an ostracized term nowadays. But, you know, it's an important term because so much of what we were taught in med school and residency and cardiology fellowship, you know, this 14 years of training I went through to become a cardiologist, it's a little disheartening to learn that so much of it was sort of really not based on science at all and kind of backwards, and trying to promote low carb and seeing amazing benefits in so many people, and then, you know, having pushback from it because low carb and cardiology aren't supposed to go together. So it's been a bit of a journey and an eye-opening awakening here to try and tread this line, I guess you can say.
Well, how did you come to this? I mean, because you graduate from med school, you're raised or you're, you know, educated in the traditional way that most allopathic doctors are. And then what happened?
Yeah, I mean, not only that, I went to a preventive cardiology fellowship where it was an Ornish style program, right? So we were deep into the vegetarian low fat nutrition training. And, you know, there are plenty of other amazing parts of the program, the community building, getting people exercising, getting them to manage their stress and quit smoking. You know, those parts of the programs were phenomenal. The nutritional part, you know, left a little to be desired, but at the time, that's all I knew, right? That's what everybody was teaching. And then I got out into practice, you know, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, thinking I was going to just, you know, reverse heart disease and prevent heart disease in everybody I saw. And, you know, the reality was far from that. And I quickly saw the revolving door of a very preventable disease of people just coming back time and time again, people not being able to adhere to the nutritional recommendations, or even those who did adhere to them just not doing well enough with their health. And it really made me realize I wasn't having the impact I wanted to have. I needed to do something different. And that's when I opened up a little preventative boutique practice. And fortunately, the health coach, who was a good friend of mine who I was working with, was deep into keto, and he kind of helped open my eyes. And I was pretty skeptical at first. I did not, think this was the right way to go. Even though I knew I wanted to impact people more, I wanted to help them more. I thought it was just with more time and more logistical help and more follow-up and higher touch. And all that is important, and I still truly believe that. But what I learned was the message was wrong, and I needed a new message. And the low-carb message, although it may not be right for everybody, is certainly right for a number of people, especially in our society with so many with broken metabolisms. So it was truly an eye-opening experience, and I can never look back. I can't go back once I've seen the impact that this type of lifestyle can have on people.
And how long ago was that?
It was about 5 years ago.
Okay, so ahead of the trend.
Well, it depends what you call the trend. I mean, people like, Dr. Westman has been doing this for 15 years, and Dr. Enfeld from Diet Doctor has been doing this for probably 10 years. And, so I by no means was I the first. There was plenty out there. It was just really it wasn't as mainstream as it is now, but the evidence has always been there. And all you have to do is go back to the early days of Gary Taubes and Nina Teicholz and see their books, which are now at least 5 years old and more, and just see it was there. The evidence was there. Just the medical society was not looking.
Are they looking now?
Purposely. Well, they sort of have to now, right? Because the most Googled dietary term in 2018 was keto. So the patients want it. The patients are looking for it. So the medical community has to wake up to it. Unfortunately, a lot of them are still resistant and not open-minded to it, but more and more are becoming open-minded. It seems like every week there's a new doc on Twitter who says, "Wow, I just saw this amazing transformation in my patient on low carb. How do I learn more?" Or even better, doctors who've gone through it themselves and say, "Wow, I didn't believe this was possible until I did it. Now I'm going to try it with all my patients." There's this snowball effect is happening with more and more people experiencing it and seeing the power.
So oh gosh, I have so many questions for you. So what types of ways are you noticing a change in their cardiac health based on going on a high fat diet, low carb diet, with regards to like cholesterol and all the different markers, and like, how are you seeing results already?
Yeah. So the most important thing is, first, how do you define cardiac health? And there are a number of ways to define it. And the ultimate is preventing heart attacks, preventing strokes, preventing people from dying. And that, to see those results, you need, 20-year longitudinal data. So I obviously don't have that, and that doesn't exist in the literature. So short of that, though, you can follow biomarkers. But here's the thing. In medicine, everybody likes to talk about the LDL cholesterol level as the end-all, be-all biomarker, the most important biomarker. And the truth is, it is far from it. I mean, you need to look at blood pressure. You need to look at metabolic syndrome and the visceral adiposity, or sort of like the big gut, the fat around your organs and in your waist. You need to look at your blood sugar and your insulin levels. You need to look at your inflammatory markers. And when it comes to your lipids, you need to know more than just your LDL-C. You need to know your LDL particle number, the actual number of particles, not the total concentration, because that is a far better predictor. And you need to put that in a context with what your HDL and triglycerides are and the size and density of your cholesterol. Those are all crucial aspects of your cardiovascular health. So if all we talk about is LDL, we're not even scratching the surface for what your overall heart health picture is. And that's one of the things I enjoy most about my online health coaching program, where I can work with people one-on-one or over the course of 6 months. And because they come to me and find me because of exactly what I said. Their doctors looking at their LDL and not really examining anything else. And that's fairly short-sighted and not going to help people a whole lot. So what I have seen is dramatic changes in, of course, weight, abdominal circumference, triglycerides, HDL, size and density of your LDL, inflammatory markers, glucose and insulin, and even more importantly, I've seen changes in how people feel, people wanting to be more involved in their health, wanting to take better care of themselves, wanting to be more proactive. Because when you think you're trying the right diet, the right lifestyle, and you're not making any progress, it's incredibly disheartening. You can blame yourself. You think you don't have enough willpower, or the deck is just stacked against you because of your genetics. And it's easy to give up. Like, why bother? But once you start seeing that initial success and you start feeling better and you start losing the weight and you start to see your blood markers improve, it's addictive. I mean, it is infectious, and you start wanting to do more and take better care of yourselves. And that's what I really love to see. People really start to buy into this process of, I can change my life. I can feel better. I can get rid of these challenges that have been plaguing me for the past 10, 15, 20 years. That's what's the addictive part.
And with heart disease being the number one killer of both men and women, this is really important stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And here's the thing. It's been the number one killer for men and women for decades. It's not like it's a new thing, right? So our society should have been all hands on deck to prevent the number one killer, or at least diminish the impact of the number one killer. And that has not happened. I mean, there have been some impressive drugs and stents and interventional procedures, but the prevention side of things with lifestyle has done nothing to lower the risk of cardiovascular disease and knock it down from the number one killer. So that's been fairly disheartening, but I'm hoping this will start to turn the tide a little bit as people become more proactive about their health. And this whole fallacy that fat is bad for our hearts is based on a house of cards, right? It's just flimsy evidence that never should have been used to make the level of recommendations that have been made. Because when you're making recommendations for the entire population, for healthy populations, you have to be absolutely certain that it's the right thing to do for health. And the quality of the evidence to support it was barely associative, barely suggestive, certainly not causative in proving anything. But yet that didn't stop them from making these broad sweeping recommendations that have really sort of set our society down a path of chronic illness.
Yeah. And so back before you came to the light side, when you were back in the dark side, I'm just kidding. But my son was a big Star Wars fan, so we use that a lot. But so what percentage of prescriptions and like statin recommendations and things like that are you writing compared to what you did in the past?
Oh, great question. I mean, it's a fraction, no question. Now, in the low carb world, I see a lot of people completely dismissing statins and completely dismissing cholesterol. So I'm not one to completely dismiss it. I definitely devalue it and value other markers more. But I still use statins. If you're someone, look, I have a handful, or not a handful, I have a number of patients who've had heart attacks in their 40s and 50s, and everybody in their family has died of heart attacks. That type of person, that is their number one concern. And you need to do absolutely everything possible to reduce their cardiovascular risk. And a statin is part of that. But it certainly is not the end all be all. Here's your statin, you're fine, don't worry about it, right? You still have to take the statin in a responsible manner. Prescribe it in a manner where you're going to get the least amount of side effects. Prescribe it in a manner where you're not going to put yourself at risk for dementia down the road. Prescribe it in a manner where you're going to get the benefits without those risks. And because the last thing I want to do is give someone a drug that makes them stiff and achy so they stop exercising. That's not a fair trade-off. The last thing I want to do is give someone a drug that's actually going to give them diabetes, which is a major risk factor for cardiovascular disease. That's not a fair trade-off. So it's prescribing a statin responsibly and making sure that the person can still maintain their overall healthy lifestyle and health profile. So I definitely still use them, but far less, especially in primary prevention. I use them mostly for secondary prevention. It comes down to what we're doing with our environmental exposures. How we live our lives is far more important than any drug we put into our mouths.
Yeah, for reals. And when you have that patient that you just were mentioning with the heart issue, do you always recommend lifestyle changes as well so that they could potentially decrease or get off of any type of medication?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. I mean, I think with a statin, you absolutely still need lifestyle modifications to, one, counteract the side effects of statins, but two, because statins affect one small part of your health. You need to be in charge of the rest of your health. And usually people come to me on 6, 7, 8 medications, and by the time I'm done with them, after 6 months, they're on 2 or 3 medications, and that's a huge victory.
Right.
Blood pressure medicines are completely optional in my mind, because you can treat blood pressure with lifestyle. Absolutely. Probably 95% of people can get off their blood pressure medicine with the right lifestyle. The key is finding the right one, sticking to it, and finding the one that will work for you long term. Statins are a little bit different, because you could argue it's not even about your cholesterol level. They can stabilize plaque, they can lower inflammation. So, having at least a low dose on, regardless of your cholesterol levels, I think is still important in that very, very high risk subset. But for the lower risk subset, I think it has virtually no role. And other things like diabetes medicines, so many people I see are on 3 or 4 different diabetes medicines and insulin, and those are all completely not needed with the right lifestyle. You can get people off all those drugs and feeling better and living naturally and reversing all their chronic health conditions. I mean, that's power. That's medicine. That's why I went to medical school and did all that training to become a cardiologist. That's the impact I wanted to have on people.
Oh yeah, amen. I totally wish that if I was younger and I could start over, that's what I would do, is just be like a doctor to teach people like the naturopathic approach to health. But for now, I'm an integrative health coach, so that's a good place to start. So
that's a great place to start.
But It's funny, doctor, because one of our best friends was over the other night, maybe a month ago, and he knows that I've been into nutrition and fitness for, over a decade. And he said, oh yeah, I have to start taking medicine and blah, blah, blah. He said a statin. And I'm like, why? He goes, I said, what's your cholesterol? He goes, I don't know. I don't remember. I said, well, what's your HDL? He goes, well, it's better than it needs to be. I said, well, what about your triglycerides? He goes, oh, they're really low. I said, then why are you taking a statin?
Yeah.
And he said, because my doctor told me to. No offense, Tracy, but, I'm going to listen to my doctor, not you. I'm like, okay.
Well, I mean, what's fascinating is if you look back to the data way back when in the Framingham study and the Framingham offspring study, these are some of the studies that were used to promote treating cholesterol because they associated LDL with increased risk of cardiovascular disease and death. But when you look a little deeper and you look at elevated LDL with high HDL, no triglycerides, the risk diminishes dramatically. It almost goes away completely in that situation. So, not all LDL is the same. Not all circumstances are treated equal. You have to put it into context. And that is, being brought to the forefront now with these hyper responders, people following, I should say these, like I'm one of them, people following a low carb diet whose LDL goes up, but whose HDL is fantastic, whose triglycerides are fantastic, and everything else is falling right in line. That's a completely different scenario than anything that's been tested in the medical literature, that anything has been proven to be risky or not. That is a completely different subset of people that have been studied. And so we sort of are on the new frontier here about what to do, and we don't know. We don't know that it's safe and perfectly harmless and everybody's going to live to be, 120 if you're following a low carb diet. We don't know that, but I think the chances are certainly higher of that than the people who are following the standard American diet or the low fat diet.
Yeah. And even more importantly is that instead of living longer in sickness, like let's live life large and then just die, instead of
Absolutely.
Living in pain and all that. So I got my blood test results in front of me because I wanted to ask you about them. Okay, so this is like burying bones. I'm going naked on this show, guys. So total cholesterol 203, triglycerides 40, HDL 52, LDL 139.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I don't have a calculator to do your total cholesterol HDL ratio, your triglyceride to HDL ratio, but off the top of my head, they look pretty good. Now, HDL for a woman, especially an active woman, I'd like to see a little bit higher, but with your triglycerides being so low, I could guess that your LDL particles are not going to be the small, dense LDL particles. So I think that's a perfectly reasonable place to start. Obviously this is not health advice, and I would need to do a complete consult and workup to put it in the context of everything. But this sort of highlights my point too. Like, that is an incomplete evaluation, what you just gave me. If that's all your doctor is working on, I think that is an incomplete evaluation. And I would love to know a lot more, and it's not like the tests are so arcane and hard to get. They're simple tests to get about what your particle number is, or what your ApoB is, and what the size and density of your LDL are, and what your lipoprotein little a is, and what your inflammatory markers are, and your A1C and your insulin. I mean, those are all just as important, if not more important, than your basic lipid profile, yet they're not tested. And part of the reason why they're not tested is because the medicine-based approach is, well, it doesn't matter, because if all we're looking at is whether to put you on a statin or not, those don't factor into the equation. Mm-hmm. And that's the problem, because that's not what we should be thinking about or looking at. We should be looking at what kind of lifestyle changes do we need to make these numbers look perfect and to improve your health and make you feel as good as you can feel. And if we're going to change different things in your lifestyle, then we need to follow those markers to see how they respond. But unfortunately, that's not the approach most doctors take nowadays.
Oh, yeah. Well, they did do a couple more things. Glucose was 88. A1C is 5.2. My blood pressure was 104 over 64. What about the calcium? Now, they didn't test me for that, but I heard there's some test that you can do that's actually better indication over like the whole typical lipid panel is some calcium score.
Yeah, so that's not a blood test. That's a CAT scan. It's a simple CAT scan, no IV needed, no IV contrast needed. It takes about 10 seconds to do. It's relatively low radiation, about the same as a mammogram. And it tells you if you have any calcium in the walls of the arteries to your heart. So it's a coronary artery calcium score, or a CAC. It has different names, but it's basically the coronary calcium score. And that's a very good predictor of what your 10-year cardiovascular risk is, to help refine that risk score. The risk calculator that we use, that's really also pretty limited and not very thorough. But it's a wonderful marker. This calcium score is a wonderful marker as something to follow too, to see what's happening with lifestyle changes. So a number of people I see in my coaching platform, they come to me with high calcium scores, and they say, my doc says I can't do a low carb diet because I have a high calcium score. I said, well, how have you been eating for the past 20 years? And it's like, the standard low fat, standard American diet attempt. And it's like, well, that's the lifestyle you're living that laid down the calcium score. So now let's see what happens by switching to a low carb diet and follow that calcium score and see what changes, and follow all your other markers as well, of course. But it's a powerful tool to use. It just has to be interpreted correctly, because there's no time stamp on the calcium. It doesn't tell you when the calcium was laid down. But chances are it wasn't overnight, right? If you've been low carb or keto for weeks or months, that's not what laid down the calcium. That's and what calcium really is a response to vascular injury. So something in your body has injured your coronary artery walls. There's been an inflammatory response, and a healing mechanism is laying down that calcium. So it shows you that you have vascular injury, vascular damage, and you have to really attack that as best as you can in every aspect to make sure it doesn't happen more in the future.
So is there any way to reverse those deposits?
Not really. So, there are a number of people, a handful of people have said, their calcium score has gone down. When I hear that, I immediately question the technique and the operator, and if they were done on different CAT scans, or if someone just missed something, because it's very, very uncommon to actually reduce the amount of calcium. But really, it doesn't matter, because the calcium itself doesn't hurt you. It's just a marker of vascular injury. What harms you is if you develop plaque in the inside of your artery, because the calcium is more in the wall of your artery. You don't want to develop plaque in the inside of your artery that then ruptures and causes a heart attack. That's what you want to prevent. So the calcium score, it doesn't matter if you reverse it. You just want to make sure it's not progressing. And you can follow other tests too, like the carotid intima media thickness test, which is a specialized ultrasound of your carotid artery, measuring the thickness of the wall. That's one that can get better. And you can see that change on a shorter time period, either worsen or improve. So that's one I like to follow as well for some people when they're making significant lifestyle changes. But the calcium score is more of an eye-opener to show you what your risk is. And it also can be really helpful, in this group of hyper responders who have LDLs of 200, 250, 260, even higher, for them to follow. If their calcium score remains 0, that's one vote of confidence that maybe this isn't something that's atherogenic or dangerous in them, because we don't know the answer to that question. So we need to evaluate them as carefully as possible to make sure we don't see any signs of progressive disease.
That's interesting. So I had a girl on the show that was a physician's assistant, and she was saying that by trying to kill the cholesterol or, take the things to reduce cholesterol, she said, we're killing the firefighter instead of putting out the fire. Yeah, it's a good analogy. I mean, is the LDL there for a reason? And in some people, the answer is yes. I mean, we don't exactly know why LDL goes up in the subset of people on a low-carb diet, but there are lots of theories, and a lot of the theories are that it's actually beneficial. It's there for a reason. It's responding to the need for transporting fat and triglycerides, and it's part of this process of a downstream effect of that. And we want it there. So that's one hypothesis. And there are some studies that show improved longevity, improved health in the elderly with higher cholesterol. Those are observational trials. So, observation trials don't prove cause and effect, but it's certainly enough to sort of pique my interest and say, well, maybe there is something here that it's protective in some way in a subset of people. And I would certainly like to know that. Interesting. Yeah. So this is what my understanding is, and please correct me if I'm wrong. Okay. So my understanding is, cholesterol has multiple roles in our body. But the one related to our arteries is when a homocysteine comes along and nicks an arterial wall, the cholesterol's job is to go and patch that nick up. Does that sound? Well, I guess maybe that's a little simplistic, but the general concept of the LDL is a response to inflammation. Like that general concept is likely correct, that the LDL can respond to injury and try and help heal that injury. So yes, I think that general concept is likely correct. Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I know that's very simple, but a lot of people, and also isn't cholesterol like the mother of all hormones, which comes. Oh, yeah. So we absolutely need it in our body. I mean, without cholesterol, we die. We need it for every single cell membrane in our body. We need it for our vitamin D and testosterone. And we need it for the neurons in our brains to coat the neurons. I mean, we need cholesterol, absolutely. And that's why there's some concern about lowering it too much. Is there increased risk of Alzheimer's disease? You certainly, people can get significant muscle aches and pains with statins from lowering the cholesterol too much. And you would not want to live in a world without cholesterol. Yeah. And I think that, okay, so this is just a hypothesis, but I think that a lot of problems with women issues and the whole menopause transition, because like I said earlier, I'm 53. I think maybe it has to do with the fact that they have been so afraid of consuming cholesterol that they've eliminated from their diet, more so. And so maybe that would contribute to more of like the hot flashes, mood swings, hormonal weight gain, because their hormones get all wonky earlier than they really should. Interesting. Very interesting. I haven't really quite thought about it like that before, although there are definitely some anecdotal reports of people who have improved PMS symptoms with low carb. So would that then also apply to sort of menopausal symptoms? Certainly plausible. I think that's fascinating, and I would love to see more information on that. Yeah, certainly sounds interesting. Well, I just made it up. I mean, but knowing what I know about cholesterol and vitamin D absorption and, hormonal, the precursors to our sex hormones and all of that, it would make, sense to me that could be an issue. Mm-hmm. So, doctor, I want to ask you about your personal experience now, because this podcast really is about sharing our personal stories as how our lives have become better through eating keto. Do you have a story, perhaps? Yeah, I do. Around the same time that I was starting my preventative practice
and working with the health coach who turned me on to keto. Around that same time, my second son was about a year old at that point. And, two young kids and a stressful life, and, the weight was increasing. And look, I've always been athletic. I've always been thin. So for me, I got up to 140 pounds, which was the most I've ever weighed in my life. So I don't have the dramatic story that most people have. But as I was learning about the low carb and keto lifestyle, I said, all right, well, if I'm going to recommend this for my patients, I want to try it myself. So I did. And, within months, I lost 8 pounds without even trying. And I actually started to feel better and more energy. And I thought, could this be coincidence, or is it like I still almost didn't believe it? It was almost too easy. And for me, there was no turning back after that. I mean, I actually experimented with a continuous glucose monitor a while back, and it was really boring because it was a complete flat line. And I said, okay, I'm going to experiment. I'm going to start eating more carbs and see what happens. And I realized I don't want to. I feel so good. I love my lifestyle. Everything's like really dialed in. Why would I want to screw it up for some silly experiment? I don't need to do that. So I took the glucose monitor off and said, forget it. I'm done with this. I don't need this because I know what it is for me. Now it's a great tool in other people for, who may not be like me, or as structured and set in their ways as me. But anyway, that was sort of my personal experience, without even looking to solve any problems or looking for an answer. It just sort of happened. And I thought, wow, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah. It is pretty amazing. And I see that you're an athlete. You said you're an athlete. Has this boosted your performance?
Yeah, it has. It actually really has. I used to be the guy. I was a triathlete growing up and have been a runner and a cyclist kind of my whole life. And I was the guy who would make sure I set my alarm an hour and a half before my workout so that I could eat something. I felt like I had to eat something, usually almost always a high carb type of food, an hour and a half before I worked out, which, if you're working out at 7:00 in the morning, is a pain to have to do. But that's how I lived my life and my training routine. And now I work out fasted and I feel great. And my workouts have really improved. I have one caveat, which is a mountain bike ride, which is basically high intensity interval training for mountain biking that's going to last more than 2 hours. I find that I do a little bit better with a little bit of carbs, like a paleo granola with some berries and nut butter. That's when I really sort of want some of that. But otherwise, 50-minute high intensity interval training, 2 hour steady road bike ride, a gym session, all those fasted in keto, and I feel great. And there's no turning back for me.
Yeah, my husband's a big mountain biker, but he's not keto. I cannot get him. I've been keto for, I think, 3 years, and I cannot get him to take the plunge. But I just, whatever. That's his thing.
That's interesting. If he sees you thriving and doing so well on it and enjoying it, I would think he'd be curious enough to give it a try. But, so carbs are tough to give up for some people.
He just has no desire. He's like, I don't need to lose weight. Why would I go keto? And that's why I'm like really trying to emphasize all the health benefits of it.
It's about more than just the weight.
Yeah. But that for him, that's what he's like. He's just like, that's what I want to worry about. So what advice would you give somebody just starting out, doctor?
Oh boy. Well, the first is to get help. I mean, because there's so many different ways to do keto and your body's going to respond differently. And there's so much out there on the internet that I see people just reading something and thinking that it's got to apply to them and try it. And if it doesn't work perfectly, then they think it's not for them. But, I think making serious lifestyle changes, especially if you're looking to improve your health, you should be working with a coach, with a doctor, with somebody who's got the experience and the knowledge about what health markers to follow, about how to institute healthy lifestyle changes, and specifically about low carb and how to tailor that to your life. I think it's invaluable to work with somebody who's got that kind of experience because let's face it, you turn on the computer and you'll see, bacon and cream and bulletproof coffee and think that that's the only way to go keto. And it's not. And that works great for some people, but not for everybody. It's not a one size fits all. And so I think that's the best advice someone can have is know that it's not always so simple, but there are people out there who can help you on your journey.
Yeah, and everybody has a different like food tolerance level. You can't. Some can do dairy, some can't. Some can do eggs, some can't. So, and fasting. Do you fast?
Well, I do. So I get a little bent out of shape about fasting and time restricted eating. Because for me, 18-6 isn't fasting, right? Not eating for 18 hours and eating for 6 hours. I prefer to call that time restricted eating. Like real fasting, in my mind, is 24 hours or more. So I definitely do daily time restricted eating, and then I'll do fasts, either once a month or once a quarter, or, I tried a 5-day once, and I don't know if I'm going to do that again. That was a little tough for me, 5 days, but 2 or 3 days I think is good every quarter. We don't have solid evidence, but there's definitely suggestions that is good for longevity. It's good for stem cell regeneration. It's good for autophagy. And, those are only good things. And what's the harm in doing it? So yeah, I'm definitely a fan of it. But again, doing it correctly, doing it intelligently, especially if you're on medications, especially if you've never done it before. People can get into trouble with longer fasts. With like an 18-6, anybody can do that pretty much. But the longer fast, people can get into trouble with, and you have to make sure you're doing it correctly.
Yeah, I actually did a 3-day fast last month, and it was way easier than I thought it was going to be. I think it's more of a mental thing than a physical thing for me.
Yeah. That's certainly part of it. Yeah. And especially if you have a family, like for me, one of the hardest things was, dinner time is a big time for our family. It's when we're all together, we all get to talk, and we're sitting around the table around this great food. And, I was looking at all, one day there was steak and veggies and avocado, like my favorite meal. And I'm sitting there and I can't eat it. And I'm like going crazy. And that was all psychological. Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many things that I think that our bodies can manage, or our bodies can do it. It's just our minds that we have to convince,
Yeah.
That's awesome. So how can people find you, doctor?
Yeah, thanks. Lowcarbcardiologist.com is probably the best place to start. That's my website. I've got a blog there. I host the Diet Doctor podcast, and there are links to that podcast on the website. I've got a lipids course, and then you can also find information about my health coaching services there as well. So lowcarbcardiologist.com is the one-stop shop.
So with that said, with your health coaching, do you take insurance, or is this like a fee for service? Yeah,
good question. So this is the medical legal world is a messy world. So I have to have two hats. If you see me in my office, I can be your cardiologist, and that can be insurance-based. If I'm seeing you online, there is no doctor-patient relationship. I am not your physician, but I certainly can help you with your lifestyle. I can't help you, diagnose and treat diseases and prescribe medications or anything like that, but I can help you with your lifestyle, and that is outside confines of insurance.
Okay. And then you wrote a book? You
I
want to talk
did,
about
yeah.
that?
Yeah, I wrote a book called Your Best Health Ever. Came out probably about 2 or 3 years ago. It's not specifically a low carb or keto book. It's a lifestyle book, and it's about educating you about what really works in lifestyle. The tagline is the cardiologist's surprisingly simple guide to what really works. Because I really tried to make this a very easy, very simple thing to just teach you, a little bit of how we've been misled, and what sort of the quote unquote right answers are, and how people can find their path and their lifestyle that's going to work for them.
Yeah. And that's good. It's like, you just have to take a shot at it and try it. And what's your favorite keto meal? I know you just said steak and veggies and avocado. Is that it?
Yeah, that certainly could be it. I'm not a true foodie, right? I don't like recipes. I like things simple. So one of the things I miss most about skipping breakfast is I don't get my eggs in the morning anymore. So now usually for lunch, I love just a couple of fried eggs with some spinach and broccoli and cauliflower and butter and cheese and avocado oil. Like that's a great start. Steak, avocado, and veggies is a great one. I just love any sort of combination of real food, simply prepared. I'm not into the sauces and the complicated recipes. I just keep it simple.
Yeah, me too. I'm so busy that I don't have time I need to get in the kitchen more, but I just want to, I'm more into the eating to live, not living to eat.
Yeah, great saying.
Well, it is what it is because I'm so busy. It's like I just want to batch cook my food and eat it when I'm hungry and not eat it when I'm not and, go from there. So awesome. Is there any other tips or tricks or any info you want to leave our listeners with today?
Just take care of yourself, take care of others, and you're on the right path.
Awesome. Well, I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show. I just was so excited to find a cardiologist that believed in a low carb lifestyle. And I'm sure your patients are even more excited to have found you.
Yeah, thanks, Tracy. I appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, wow. Was that not great information? Thank you so much for listening. I truly enjoyed talking with Dr. Scher. And I love the idea that he is thinking outside the box and not just being a prescription writer and pushing pills, but literally changing lives through diet and lifestyle. So I just thank you so much for listening. Please head on over to iTunes, give us a rating and review. And if you have any people that you think would make great guests for the show, please let me know. Make it a great day, everyone. This podcast contains the opinion and thoughts of its host and guests. It is intended to provide helpful and informative material on the subjects covered. All statements made on the podcast have not been evaluated by the FDA and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease. If the listener requires professional assistance or advice, please contact your personal medical doctor. Both host and guest specifically disclaim any responsibility for any liability, loss, or risk, personal or otherwise, which is incurred as a consequence directly or indirectly of the use and application of any of the contents of these episodes. Like I said, this is my opinion and I could be wrong.